You could not escape the poignancy in Providence today.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Now, I have to tell you, after 10 days since the passing of Buddy Cianci, I still haven't been able to get my head around it. I mean, no one's getting out here alive. But I think, you know, having worked next to him on the radio lineup for a lengthy period of time, having, you know, covered him in the 16 years that I've been here as a media guy following an elected official, having had access to that city hall, I had good access to that city hall. Having tried to understand him, having closed a couple of taverns with him. I tell some funny stories I might even share with Joe Paolino tonight. Yes, that Joe Paolino, the former mayor, who issued a eulogy today that really was a heck of a signature on the funeral mass. All of those things, it's still not really settled in. And while I come loaded for bear today on the news of the weekend, the truck toll controversies, we'll have a heavy show on that tomorrow. The Super Bowl and everything else that would be a contemporary conversation that I would go to the rundown for. After sitting in the cathedral today and just being part of a mass, but watching this tribute, I couldn't help but think we'll spend the entire evening tonight talking about Buddy with not his newfound friend, but what was at least a dozen years or so ago his new friend. And it was quite the story that Joe Paolino actually told today. Here was the headline that said it today. The carriage was a nice touch. It really was. And I will tell you, one of the nicest touches of the Mass today was when Father Bernard Healy, who gets the politicians, he gets them. He combined a homily of extraordinary spiritual proportion with a political analysis that was right on the money.
I think Buddy probably ordered the weather today. No doubt he is monitoring all the plowing. He's finding out which streets haven't been plowed yet and which streets will never be plowed.
Might have been the line. I mean,
it's a good line. He's good.
Might have been the line of the morning.
Yeah, it was good. We were all thinking about it. I felt bad that Mayor Lawson was sitting behind me because he's got to worry about it.
Right. Welcome.
Good to be here.
How you doing?
Doing all right. Sleeping last night was tough, and taking a shower this morning was tough. That's when you're alone like that. My mind was, last night I just couldn't sleep, and I started crying a little bit, and the same thing when I was in the shower today. But it is what it is. You move forward.
I got a ton of questions, but frankly, I want you to tell a ton of stories. The eulogy that you gave at the end of the Mass today was chock full of some stories that I hope some people watching tonight can either get a second chance at or a first time tonight. But
sure.
What was the day like? And what the poetic scene of a heavy snowfall, the horse-drawn carriage, the plow down Atwell's, I'm told. I left after the funeral. The struggle for people to get there on a tough weather day, all those things. Mm-hmm. Never mind 2 days at City Hall where people were able to pay respects to the mayor over a 12-hour period of time. What's in your head and your heart right now?
Well, going down Atwell's Avenue was very special because Buddy was always known as the one that revamped Atwell's Avenue when he first became mayor in 1975. So seeing all the people lined up in front of all the storefronts, they all had Buddy Cianci signs in their windows, and they were holding them. It was very special. We'll never see that again in this town. This morning, I mean, I got up so early. I was in my office at 5:45, 5:30, 5:45, and I was still making changes to my words of remembrance. And I just had to be alone by myself and make the changes I wanted to make. I walked over to City Hall, and he's there. He's in front of his old office, He's just lying there, and he's in this box, and he was claustrophobic, and I kept on thinking of that. But I also saying to myself, he would have wanted this. He really would have wanted it. He also didn't think it would ever happen, though.
Interesting.
Because he and I had that conversation.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
This is a funny story. He was running for mayor, or thinking about running for mayor, asking me what I thought he should do. And I said, look.
The last time?
Last time. I said, look, you've just been diagnosed with cancer. You can't do it. I said, you're going to take care of your health. It's too aggressive. I said, well, they say I'll be okay, and I don't need an operation right away. I can wait 6 months. I said, buddy, you don't fool around with health that way. I've seen my father go through it. You just don't do it. And he said, well, what are the pros and the cons? Now, this is not just one conversation. It's over a number of conversations. And I said, well, you're not going to take care of your situation. Figure this, if you win, you'll probably die in office. I said, but the good part about it is you can call the police chief in, the fire chief, and you can say, give me a mock funeral. You get laid out in state at City Hall. You go down the front steps. There'll be a horse and buggy. He said, gee, that's one of the only good reasons why I should run. And so we kidded about it. But I remember I went to a funeral for somebody some months back, for Jim Skeffington. And I told him how many people there. The place was packed. There was more priests on the altar than they would have in the Vatican. And I remember him saying they would never do that for me. And I said, well, you'd be surprised. But so he'd really be shocked, humbled, and love it. He'd love every minute of it. I think the only regret that he would have is that he couldn't watch it. And hopefully he was.
That's the mystery of life and death, right?
That's correct. And that's above my pay grade.
Yeah, it's above everybody's pay grade, just about. We'll pause on that. We'll come back and Joe will tell you a couple of more stories, and because that's what it really is, stories. Stay with us.
An elaborate funeral mass at Providence's Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul, celebrated by Bishop Thomas Tobin and many priests, for legendary ex-mayor Vincent Buddy Cianci, driving snow and winds outside, warmth and words of remembrance from the pews and pulpit. Cianci's casket covered in a customary white pall, marked by a sprawling crushed velvet cross. The governor, mayor, dignitaries, and private citizens listened to the words of former Providence Mayor Joe Paolino, who quoted Teddy Roosevelt on the man who strives valiantly.
If he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place in history shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
The Prince of Providence, a man who did good, committed sins, paid for them, lost his only daughter, never stopped going.
If there's just one inspiration to be drawn from Buddy Cianci, the mayor and the man, the grandpa, every time he suffered a tragedy, trials, tribulations, or tears, he got back up.
Paolino closed with a nod to Buddy's second mayoralty.
When Buddy came back in 1990, his campaign slogan was, he never stopped caring about Providence. Buddy, we hope you're looking down today with pride, knowing that that Providence will never stop caring about you.
That's you today on your friend, who you described as somebody who, in the early stages of your relationship, you were on a last name basis with.
He used to love to say that, Paolino, we're on a last name basis. And we didn't like each other. We were rivals. He was mayor and I wanted to be mayor.
By the way, you can wipe those tears if you need to. I'm just saying.
I'm sorry?
I'm saying you can wipe those tears if you need to.
But we were rivals, and we were, I challenged him a lot when I was a councilman. And we just really didn't like each other. Our friendship was separate from politics. I think we had different politics then. I think, it's hard to it was easy to get friendly with Buddy and for him to get friendly with me when neither one of us needed anything from each other. But when somebody is in a high elected office and somebody is trying to be your friend, you always wonder why. And I'm sure he thought that with many people when he was in office. Quite frankly, I thought that when I was in office. My friends are the ones I went to high school with and college with. My friends I hang out with even till today. It's not my political buddies. That's not friendship. Those are colleagues. Those are. But Buddy and I developed a friendship that was separate from the politics. We just both happened to have politics in our blood, and we should give each other a fix once in a while, back and forth. I mean, every morning I would call him at 8:30. You say, "Good morning, doctor." I say, "Hey, governor." And the reason why I'd call him governor, I told him that years ago I was in London, and I was in the cab, and the taxi driver said, "Good evening, governor," because that's how they talk in London. And my brother was with me, my late brother was with me. He said, "Look at that. You spent all that money trying to become governor. You could have come here for a few pounds and gotten it for nothing." So we used to have some fun like that.
He stayed in your place. I mean, he had an
At
apartment.
the 903, yeah. Yeah, when he was away, as I said today, a couple of his close friends who were friendly with me asked me to write him a letter. I mean, quite frankly, what am I going to say? How's life at Fort Dix? I know it stinks. But they said, he wants to hear gossip, tell him about current events, talk about Providence. And those letters, I think, were unexpected for him to receive. And we just started writing back and forth to each other. And he said, "Would you ever come out and visit me?" And I said, "Sure." And I remember like yesterday, Dan, I mean, I walked in there and he was in a bad place. I don't want anybody to think he was in a camp. There was no camp. And we sat in the cafeteria with each other. And I wanted to leave around 1 o'clock to catch a 2:30 plane, because you had an hour drive back to the airport in Philadelphia. He said, "Could you stay a little while longer?" Now the next plane was like at 8 o'clock at night, and I could only stay there until 4. So I knew that I had a long wait. I said, "Of course." What am I going to say? No? Of course. And I remember leaving, how sad he was when I left there. And I sat in the car and I was just saying, this guy doesn't belong here. There's just so much talent that's being wasted. Have him do something else. But don't let him be here and waste him away. So, but there's no constituency for criminal justice reform, is there? Who's going to say, if somebody's been convicted of a white-collar crime or any other crime when a person you think has something to offer the community, there's no constituency for that. But he always took this stuff as a man. He didn't look back. He always went forward. And that when he came back, we talked about, where he would go, and I had a position for him at 15 Beacon Street, a nice hotel in Boston. I figured it would be great for him. The owner there said yes to me immediately, and he's an old friend of mine. And then when Buddy got to the halfway house, he said, "Joe, there's media everywhere, and everybody knows I'm going to 15 Beacon Street. I don't want it." And I said, "Okay, let me see what we can do." And so I worked it out with my partners for him to work at the 903. And his daughter Nicole was living there with her family and her children. And I think that was critical for him. That's where they spent so much time together. And so he worked there, and then he got an apartment there. He also had his office there. And he felt secure. Buddy was the kind of guy, as worldly and as smart and as intelligent he was a homebody. He was a Rhode Islander. He was a Providence guy. You take him outside of his boundaries, he really didn't feel that comfortable. Plus, he wanted to be the only one on stage too. So being around people that he knew, he felt very comfortable with. And once he was at the 903, he knew where his place was. Don't take him out of it. So there, you see some insecurities in people sometimes like that. But one of my assistants, my top assistant, Linda, worked for him when he was mayor. And
Linda Veras.
Linda Veras, yeah.
Who today, I mentioned on the radio, was running the show pre-funeral.
I love her.
Just like she ran the office.
Yeah. And everybody loves Linda.
Loves her.
Everybody loves her. And we would talk about how comfortable he was. And she told me when he came out, he couldn't believe how the automobiles had changed. Simple things that we take for granted when you've been incarcerated like he was. So it took time for him. And when I told the story today about going on the boat, I remember him sitting on the aft deck when the boat's traveling from Newport to the Hamptons, and he's just smoking a cigarette. He was, I don't know, I think he had a drinking a martini, and he's just looking out at the water thinking. I didn't want to interrupt him. And when we went out and went to Matt Lauer's house that night, I mean, he said, "Did this really happen?" He said, I can't believe how I'm being received. I said, yeah, they still love you. But for him, it was different because he knew that he had problems in the past, and that's why he would have been surprised to get all this attention today being laid out in City Hall and having the bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese say the Mass for him.
Sheldon Whitehouse, no. David Cicilline, no. The Governor Raimondo,
She was there.
Struggled with the flags at half-staff, caught herself and rethought it. Part of the legacy of him, which is nothing was easy, nothing was without controversy, nothing was without some sore feelings all the way around. Oh well.
Well, yeah. But you know, there's a common thing, and one of the common things with Buddy and I maybe back then was that we were both in the arena. I talked about what Teddy Rosa wrote a year after he was in office. And about being in the arena is something very special. And even if it's a rival or an opponent, you still have something common with each other than those poor timid souls on the sidelines who don't know victory nor defeat.
A few more minutes with the former mayor. How about the former mayor? Stay with us.
I witnessed firsthand his tears, his fears, and his triumphs. This was the private side of my friend Buddy.
Some of your thoughts at the end of the funeral mass today. When he lost that race, now he'd already been diagnosed and he was in a better place. But when he lost that race, I could not help but think to myself that this could accelerate, and I said this as soon as he had passed, that this could accelerate what happened. That
the stress of it?
Well, just the loss, no, the heartbreak of losing that race, and not. Listen, I know he enjoyed being on the radio. It's no doubt he enjoyed being on the radio.
And that was
but
tough.
It didn't match.
Don't be so sure on that.
It didn't. Well, listen. I listened pretty carefully, and I've watched him, and I know you're very close with him. But here's my point: he wanted one more shot.
Yes, he did.
He wanted it, and he didn't get it. And I just thought, oh boy, this could kill him. Was the thought I had when he lost the election. What was it like after he lost the election?
He was back on the radio the next day.
I know he was.
In fact, we
I know
talked
he
on the
was.
phone. Let me tell you though what happened. We talked that morning, and he said, "What do you think I should do?" I said, "Go back on the radio at 3 o'clock." I didn't have to tell him that. He was going to do it anyways.
Yeah,
right. And he said, "Who should I have on my desk as my guest?" I said, "Why don't you call Loza?" He said, "That's a heck of an idea." And he called him to see if he'd come on. But because of the problem with the station and the unions and all that, I guess all the Democrats have said that they won't go on or something. But I tell you what I think exasperated his illness. Nicole dying. That's the stress that I think ate him up more. Because when my brother died, I saw the stress eat my father. And I always said, my brother died in '97. My father passed away, I think, in 2012. But it was the stress that he died when my brother died. And I think Nicole's death affected him a lot. The political party...
He came back to work so soon after that. It shocked me.
Didn't shock me at all. Didn't shock me at all. Because he had a great job, and part of the struggle was, why do I want a pay cut? Why do I want to change my life?
No, I'm talking about after Nicole passed. He came
Well,
back
he had
to work.
That was the
It
people. It was his
shocked me.
therapy. It was therapy for him. He needed it. He needed it. He needed it bad. He needed to talk to his listeners and his followers, and he needed to be involved in current events. And I think that was very important to him.
So you say you'll never see this kind of relationship with the city of Providence. You are a pretty respected former mayor yourself. So when you go through this today, when you have this saga really with Buddy Cianci, a relationship that was exclusively on a last name basis that became what seems to me, at least by your representation, a pretty intimate friendship.
Yes, it was.
And knowing that you too served the city between his stints.
Mm-hmm.
How does it all fit for you?
I mean, I'm not in politics anymore. I'm in business. I'm in real estate. I love doing what I do. I mean, I love it. I mean, I sleep fast at night, so I get up early in the morning and go to work. That's how much I enjoy my job. But in regards to the role that I had, remember, I'm 60 years old today. I was 29 when I became the mayor. I served in between his 2 terms. And I stated this today, there were projects that he started that I finished. There were projects that I started, he finished.
But he would say.
He'd say he did it all. But that's okay, because he needed to do that more than I did. But we did do some good things together. And one of those projects, like the Providence Place Mall, and that was a project that I had started in the 80s. We've traveled together to Seattle to try to bring in Nordstrom's. I was now head of economic development. We did that together. And I don't think it would have happened if I was just doing it on my own, or if he was just doing it on his own. We did, and that kind of broke some of the ice with us, because that was a controversial project back in those days. And a lot of the political people were afraid to be connected to it.
You know, I on Thursday when he passed, I get on the radio at noon, and already people want to tell stories about Buddy Cianci, and I thought it was too quick. And about an hour into it, I realized, well, during his entire public life, people were telling stories. There wasn't a minute that went by that somewhere in southern New England, somebody wasn't telling a story about Buddy Cianci anyway, so why not the continuum? It was one of the ways I kind of dealt with having to respond to him being on the air so quickly. And so the stories of Buddy Cianci are going to be legendary. Everyone's got one. Some not so good, but a lot funny and a lot profound. And there are a lot of heartbreak. There was a lot of folks with heartbreak that went through City Hall this last weekend. And I wonder, that memorial being what it is in its space of a mourning period, what will be the memorial going forward? Certainly there'll be one. Have you thought about it?
You know, I haven't gone there. I do think that it would be nice if the city decided if they ever wanted to name something after him. He was legendary. He was iconic. Whenever you talk about Providence to people on the outside, they all mention, well, who's that mayor that has the spaghetti sauce? Or who is that mayor who did all the great things in downtown? And they all talk about Buddy. They've seen him nationally. So I do think it would be fitting for something to take place for him.
Need some time.
But let's give it to some time, and I think people are going to miss him. Look, he took us on a heck of a ride on that roller coaster for over 40 years. And even though he was mayor for 21 years, he was around for over 40 years. And we all had a seat on that roller coaster. We were on the great highs and some of the tough lows, but we all were able to get off safe.
I'm honored that you came by today on such a tough day.
Thank you.
You know, condolences to the state of Rhode Island, but to you as his special friend, my personal condolences, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Final word when we come back. Stay with us. Back to the business of truck tolls tomorrow and all that is newsy, of course, but for tonight, really all on my mind is just to say, Buddy Cianci, rest in peace.